I like the energy here. I like being with you all. I like Linda Lewis. Everything that she had to say. Luke Warford, our next railroad commissioner. Chairman Hayes is doing such a great job organizing us. All these candidates who are running for office. Mary Duty, we've come a long way from the first time you invited me out to Waco in 2017. And I think, the look on your face when you read my name, you were saying, what is a Beto? And we got to know each other, and you said, do not sleep on Waco. I don't care what they are telling you about Waco out there in El Paso, or what they say in Austin, or any other part of the state. The people in this community work so hard, stand up and fight for one another. If you will show up, and we did time and time again, they will show up for you. And together in 2018, we produced the largest voter turnout in Texas history, going back to 1970, because of the people right here in McLennan County and Waco. You all made it happen. And I'll let you in on something in terms of what we're doing right now in 2022. We, together, right here in Waco, are going to win this election for governor. We're going to win because we are going to fight for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, her own health care. We're going to win because we're going to make sure that every teacher is paid enough to just have one job instead of 2 or 3. We listen to them and cancel the STAR test so that they can focus on those kids in front of them in the classroom. Every retired teacher gets a cost of living adjustment every year going forward, so they don't have to work themselves through their retirement. We're going to make sure that we prioritize public education right here in Waco and across the state of Texas. We're going to expand Medicaid and bring $10 billion in a year to make sure that we're no longer 51st in the nation in mental health care access, or leading the country in the number of kids who are dying of diabetes in the year of our Lord 2022, more than 100 years after they invented insulin. That this is happening in Texas today is on your conscience, it's on mine, but it's also on all of us to do all we can with what we have, where we are, to make sure that we overcome this by winning this election. Just think about that agenda right there. Respecting women enough to trust them to make their own decisions. Expanding Medicaid so that no one is too poor or unfortunate to be able to see a doctor, or take their kid to a therapist, or fill a prescription that will literally save their lives. Ensuring that we get behind our public school educators so they can connect with those kids and stoke a lifelong love of learning, which once we do, they're unstoppable, and so are we as a state. Find me the Republican or the Independent or the Democrat, for that matter, who's going to take the other side of this argument. These are the big things that bring us together, whatever the differences might exist between us. And yes, there are some things that we may argue over or debate. No two people will agree on everything all of the time. Those of you who are married will know what I'm talking about. But we can find the common ground right now at a time that we're sick and tired of the division, the polarization, a governor who's busy trying to tell us who we're supposed to hate next or be afraid of in our own communities, in our own family, distracting us from the greatness that is ours by right as Texans, the big things that we want to do together. Just think about the person who's in the highest office of power right now in the state of Texas. Chaos, incompetence, cruelty, and corruption. Luke mentioned this in his comments about the grid. The fact that we live in the energy capital of the world. And when the temperature dropped last February, not only could we not keep the lights on, or the heat running, or the water flowing because it froze in our pipes, but we lost the lives of at least 700 of our fellow Texans. 11-year-old boy in Conroe, his mom could not pile enough blankets on his body to keep him alive through the night. 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran could no longer charge his tank in his home, the oxygen he needed to stay alive. So he takes it out to his truck. He's going to charge it there. They find him dead of hypothermia. Little girl who dies next to her mom in their garage as they try to stay warm next to that car. They got the engine revving. They don't realize they're breathing in carbon monoxide, poisoning themselves to death. Folks who burned up in their homes and apartments, literally burning the furniture inside of them. Luke mentioned 36 degrees in his apartment. Somebody said 34 degrees here. They would have frozen to death otherwise. They took their chances and they died. You know, that didn't have to happen. Wasn't caused by God. It was not the fault of Mother Nature. That guy in the highest position of power, who couldn't keep the power on for all of us, was warned repeatedly that the grid had underlying vulnerabilities. It was going to require action. It was going to require investment. It was going to require leadership to save the lives of our fellow Texans. He did nothing. And when the temperature dropped and the grid began to fail, he actually ordered the people at the Public Utility Commission to peg the price of electricity at its maximum allowable rate, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days. Gas, fuel started trading at 200 times the growing rate. Brazos Electricity, your utility right here, though they had a contract, the pipeline company essentially had a gun to their head and said, I know we had a deal, but I'm going to charge you 200 times that. Your utility went into bankruptcy, in the red, billions of dollars. And it's not like the story ends there. They passed that bill onto each one of you. On average, our rates in Texas going up $45 a month, to add insult to injury. And you know what? Those 5 days that they couldn't keep the lights on, those pipeline companies, those energy traders made $11 billion in profit. 5 days. The largest transfer of wealth, literally, in Texas history. And not only was it immoral, because it was happening while you were freezing in your homes, but it was illegal. There's literally a state statute that prohibits price gouging during a declared disaster or emergency. So in addition to fixing the grid by weatherizing and winterizing every part of it and connecting ERCOT, our grid, with the national grid so we can draw down electricity when we need it, sell it back up when we have a surplus, we're going to go after those folks who stole from us and get those $11 billion back and return it to the ratepayer right here in the state of Texas. That's what we can do when we come together. That's how we defeat that corruption, that cruelty, and that incompetence. Now look, I don't think Greg Abbott wakes up saying, how can I make the grid fail today? Or how can I let down those 32,000 kids in the foster care system that I've been warned about time and again are emerging from foster care more damaged than when they went in. That was the ruling of Judge Jack, a federal judge here in Texas, 6 years ago. Well, just this last January, she said, that situation, Governor, that I described to you back then, it's gone from bad to worse. 100 children since the year 2020 have died in the custody and the care of the state of Texas. Hundreds more have been trafficked and sexually abused. We send them to privatized care providers with no accountability, no justice, no resources. We ask these CPS caseworkers who are already overburdened and underpaid to do literally the impossible for these kids who are depending on them. Kids who tonight, think about this, when you go back to your homes and we go to our hotel room here in Waco, who will be sleeping in the offices at CPS, in the hallways, underneath the desks, atop the tables. I don't think Greg Abbott wakes up saying, hey, I want to really hurt these kids right now. I want more of them to die on my watch. But for whatever reason, he's unwilling or incapable of doing the right thing to ensure that we can save their lives or fix the grid or prevent 19 kids from being shot in the face by a guy who has an AR-15, a weapon originally designed for use in combat, that he legally purchased in the state of Texas at the age of 18. Although he didn't just buy one, he bought two, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. My 3 kids started school in El Paso last Monday, no safer than they were when they left their last school year at the start of this summer. Now, he can call a special session to go after transgender kids, and he did. He can call a special session to make it harder to vote in the state of Texas, and he did. But he dares not call a special session to find the common ground. Listen, we may not each be able to get our ideal or our version of perfect, but we can agree on things like a universal background check or a red flag law or raising the minimum age of purchase from 18 to 21 for an assault weapon. That would save so many lives. That would give our kids, and I'm talking about the O'Rourke kids, your kids, our kids some confidence that we actually care about their lives more than we care about the profits of the gun industry or the NRA or the special interests or the status quo that we have today. They're counting on us, ladies and gentlemen. You know that. They don't get a vote in this election. They don't have a voice but through us and what we are willing to do right now. If you are like me, what's going on in this country, especially what's going on in Texas right now, means that everything that we care about is on the line. Women's bodily autonomy, the ability for you to marry the person of your choice and your dreams, your ability not to be harassed in school because of your difference from anybody else in that classroom, or your ability to survive the school year and go into the next one and have your biggest worry be passing the algebra test and not going up against a guy who's got a weapon that was originally designed for use on a battlefield. Our kids are watching us. They're watching us today, and I guarantee you they're watching us from the future. Imagine the textbooks written decades from today. The people of 2022 who face these existential challenges, the ones I just named, the ones we're all thinking about on this hot afternoon. The climate is changing, and again, not God or Mother Nature, but you and I, our excesses, our emissions, our inaction in the face of the facts, in the one state that is doing more to change the climate and the one state that has more to do to stop this. The ingenuity, the innovation, the technology, the hard work, the willpower right here. When will we unleash it, or will it be too late? And then what Linda just said earlier. In this great democracy, 246 years into this experiment, which you'll have to agree with me, is truly the exception on the planet today. Most people cannot do what we're doing right now around the world. Peacefully come together and non-violently decide the future of our community, our state, and our country. It's not thugs and strongmen, it is the people. Always imperfectly, right? 246 years ago, you had better be a white man with property. And over time, we've expanded the franchise in our democracy to include more and more people. And I kind of thought it was a linear line of progress, and every victory was final. And it was only a matter of time before everyone was included. But I think the rude awakening that I came to, and maybe you did as well, is this fight is never over. No victory is final. In fact, it can be reversed. We just heard about the fact that we're sitting here and standing here on the anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which creates the first truly multiracial democracy in this country and maybe on the planet. I don't know. Many of you may know world history better than I do. But it was a long time coming, and the road ran right through the state of Texas. And it's important for us to hear this, because for those of you who are losing faith and confidence that we can overcome the challenges that we have before us today, just know that we've been here before against greater odds and still prevailed. In 1923, our predecessors in this state, through their representatives in the legislature, outlawed voting by African Americans in Texas. It was not count how many jelly beans are in the jar, or pay this poll tax, or recite the state constitution, or go through this literacy test, or some other indignity. Literally in state statute, it said if you're black, you're not voting. Now, Dr. Lawrence Nixon, my fellow El Pasoan, who moved there in 1910, started the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas, happened to be in El Paso, voted in every election before 1923. In 1924, goes ahead, gets his poll tax, pays it, gets the receipt. Every voter had to do that back then. Takes the receipt to fire station number 5 on Texas Ave in El Paso, Texas. Goes up, sees the election judges, who he knows by name. They know him as well because he's never missed an election, and says, I'd like to vote. And the election judge says, Dr. Nixon, you know I can't let you vote. And Nixon says, I know you can't, but I've got to try. So he goes to a federal bench in El Paso, takes his case there, fails, the decision is made against him, appeals all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where he wins not once, but 2 signal victories. It takes him 20 years. It's not until 1944 that our elections begin to become integrated again in the state of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, that history that persistence, that perseverance, that courage, that tenacity, that strength, that was not lost on Lyndon Baines Johnson when he convened Congress in March of 1965, but a week from Bloody Sunday, when another hero of ours, John Lewis, at the tender age of 24 years old, tries to lead a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, simply for the right to vote. For him, for everyone who looked like him, for everybody else in this country, and for every generation that followed. And this is what LBJ said, and I'm going to paraphrase here. He said, look, as it was in Concord, during that Revolutionary War that established this democracy in the first place, as it was in Appomattox in 1865 that answered the question, will we or will we not be a country of free people, so it is today in 1965 with John Lewis and those other brave souls willing to risk and give their lives for this democracy. That speech, that action by John Lewis, so compelling that a majority white institution willingly ceded power or enlarged that power so that more people could vote and participate in our democracy. Barbara Jordan in 1975 picks up the lead, expands that to include language minorities, Hispanics, Mexican Americans right here in the state of Texas to make sure that they too would be represented in our democracy. That's the path that we've been on. But you go back to Shelby, which was just referenced earlier. You go back to January 6, 2021. You go back through the slow rolling coup that meets one state legislature after another, including in Texas in 2021, where they are rolling back this right to vote. And this is not a talking point from Democrats. 13% of the ballots cast by mail in this state in March of this year were rejected. Not 13% of the folks stayed at home or couldn't find the polling place or got confused along the way. They actually qualified, requested the ballot, filled it out, mailed it in, and it got rejected. If we saw 13% rejection in Venezuela or Cuba, we'd say that checks out. Those aren't real democracies. If that happened in Russia, we said, okay, you guys are pretending. We're the real deal. It is happening here. A 95-year-old veteran in Texas. We don't know if he's a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter to us. No me importa. He tries 3 separate times to vote by mail, and every single attempt is rejected by the state of Texas. Now you tell me who among us has earned the right to vote more than that guy who was willing to lose his life half a world away in World War II fighting fascism to defend democracy at home. And yet this is the Texas that he lives in today. So as we follow the lead of those who are persevering right here in Waco, let us just remember, there are those who came before us and did as much against greater odds, and that you and I, if we're thinking about LBJ's speech in 65, if it was Concord and Appomattox and Selma, now it's Waco in 2022, never has this democracy been under this kind of attack in our lifetimes, and maybe not since the era of Jim Crow prior to 1965. We alone, because no one is going to ride to our rescue. Not the Department of Justice, although we wish that they would. Not those Democrats in the Senate and the House and the White House, although we wish that they would pass a new Voting Rights Act. Not the Supreme Court. They're racing in the other direction altogether. It's got to be us, the people of Texas. And the way that we do this is reaching out to others right here in the state of Texas. That means knocking on doors on warm days like these, sweating through our shirt, our pants, our chones, our socks, our shoes, making sure that with an open heart, an open mind, and open ears, we're connecting with our fellow Texans where they are. Because this voter suppression that we heard about, this voter intimidation, it is working. 7 million of our fellow Texans who were eligible to vote in 2020, the most consequential election since 1864 for my money, 7 million of our fellow Texans did not cast a ballot. Not for any lack of love for this democracy, not because they're lazy, but when you close down 750 polling locations in the fastest growing state in the union, twice the number of the next closest state, and most of those closures are concentrated in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods, when you have a gerrymander of this state that allows those in power to pick their voters instead of the other way around. And chances are, if you're black or you're brown, they'll draw you out of a district to minimize your voting power and the likelihood that you would vote. It's going to take us intervening to stop this cycle. The number one reason given by those 7 million who did not vote in 2020 right here in Texas is that no one knocked on their door and asked them to vote, literally. Now, if you're politically engaged and you're aware and you vote, and chances are the fact that you're here means that you are, just think about for a second those who are working 2 or 3 $7.25 an hour minimum wage jobs who may feel like they just don't have time for this stuff. Or folks who read the headlines about these voter suppression laws and folks being sent to jail for 5 years for voting a provisional ballot because they didn't realize they were still on paper. Let's make sure that we understand and use our empathy and connect with them and bring them in right now, because the other side of this darkness that has descended on Texas is we are the generation that gets the chance to fight for and win everything that matters to every one of us. Are you all with me? Do you want to be in this fight? Do you want to win this election? Do you want to make sure that we save this democracy so we can do the big things that actually matter? Everything that we've talked about so far, I feel like can bring all of us together. If you just say, listen, this guy Beto who's running for governor, he just wants you to be able to vote. Doesn't care who you vote for, doesn't care your party affiliation, doesn't care the difference between you. He just wants to make sure that you can vote. If you're a teacher, that you get paid enough. If you're retired, that you can live through that retirement without working 2 or 3 jobs. If you're a veteran, is willing to lose his life for this country. If you're a veteran who just came back, she served in Iraq and Afghanistan, he wants to make sure that we're fulfilling our end of the bargain to you. Commander Sherman just had us out in Killeen not too long ago. We talked about standing up a toxic burn pit registry right here in the state of Texas. Who cares what the federal government can or cannot do in Texas? We're going to get it done. We're going to listen to veterans who are sick and tired of being prescribed opioids at the VA and legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. So that if you find something else that's going to save your life and realize that it relieves your symptoms, we're not going to send you to jail for doing that. And if we acknowledge the fact that most of those who serve time for possession of a substance that's legal in most of the rest of the country are black and brown, we're also going to expunge the arrest records for those who have served time for marijuana in the state of Texas. We can do this. If Greg Abbott's Texas is it's you or me, our Texas is going to be it's you and me. It's all of us coming together at this incredibly decisive, defining moment of truth. So Waco, I'm so grateful to be with you right now. I'm asking you to think about what you are willing to do to make sure that we can bring this victory home. There are a number of volunteers who are wearing yellow vests with us today. They will sign you up for a block walk. That means knocking on these doors, talking to these voters, bringing them in right now. Remember, we only lost in 18 by 2.6%. 216,000 votes. There's 7 million out there that we have yet to hear from, whose votes have yet to be counted. They're waiting on you to show up. So please, please sign up before you leave. And as we turn to the question and answer part of this program, where we want to hear from anyone here in Waco who wants to ask a question, share an idea, talk to us about your expectations for the next 4 years. Let me just say, it is an extraordinary honor to be able to run this race on your behalf. An even greater honor to be able to win this and actually serve you, to get this state moving in the right direction, and to make sure that we are living up to our full promise and our full potential, every single one of us, regardless of the differences between us. You all with me on this? Let's do this. Let's go win this race. Let's do it together. And now let's listen to one another.